Welcome to the WanderLearn podcast. I'm your host, Tapon. In this episode, I interview Nate Ritter of Room Steals. It is a Chrome browser extension that you can use to find out super great deals on rooms. So whenever you're visiting a hotel, boom, you get notification of the best deal out there. It's actually a pretty cool app. I've tried it, but we actually don't spend too much time talking about it. Instead, we get into the nitty-gritty of all the things about travel and the seedy underworld of travel. What is wholesale pricing? How do you get into it? And all the fun and games that happen behind the scenes that most tourists are not even aware of. So I hope this is a helpful podcast for those who want to learn a bit more about the backstory of travel. I'm so fucking old that I actually remember once when Expedia did not allow you to do a certain number of searches. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
It was crazy. It's just like, I mean, today we're laughing at it, but back then what people would do is that they would, I guess, I don't know if it was travel agents or somebody was just like searching for a million fares and it's just like, wow, you're really taxing our database here. And, you know, every little query, it costs us some money. And so they had to put a cap. And of course, now we're kind of laughing at that because we're cool. You know, now we have like incredible amount of data mining and all that kind of stuff being flown around. Anyway, so
but that still exists. The funny thing is that cap still exists. It's just that you don't see it. Oh yeah,
really?
It still exists. Yeah, there's a ratio.
So they raised it.
Well, they changed it a little. It's called look to book, and what they do is basically the ratio is how many times do you look at something before you book it. Now, it's not necessarily to the consumer's problem anymore. Now it's a problem of what we call caching. And in the technology space, what that means is we're basically going to look at this hotel price for this date, and then we're going to hang on to that and not look at it again for some period of time. It might be an hour, it might be a day, whatever it is. But then anybody who goes to look for that price, we're going to give them the cached version, a saved version of that, until they're ready to actually book the thing. And that might what we're guessing.
Happens?
Well, then we're going to actually have to check to see what that price really is right at that moment. And we might be off. We might have to change something slightly here or there, or we might have to eat it, or, you know, there's a lot of different ways to handle that. But that look to book ratio still exists, and it's just all done in the middlemen. So you don't have to see what's going on as a consumer, but I, as one of the middlemen, do have to deal with that.
Wow.
If somebody's looking all the time, I have to actually cut them off as a source. Or they have to start booking something because they're probably scraping data, you know,
when
stuff
you're
like
saying,
that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so when you're saying you have to cut them off, you as this plug-in extension on the browser, all of a sudden somebody can start abusing it, and then you get penalized as the creator of the browser extension.
Right, exactly. Because the people who own the inventory can say, well, hey, you've looked at this 100,000 times and you haven't bought anything, so you're not worth it to us. So we're going to cut you off and you no longer get our inventory.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah. So, and by the way, is there a truth to the rumor that they raise fares on weekends because that's when most people actually book stuff and Tuesday is cheaper and that kind of stuff?
It's much more complicated than that now. But yeah, I mean, the complication is that they don't have to do it on the weekend. They do it dynamically. So it could be based on the fact that they know you're a big purchaser. It could be based on how many things that you've done in the past. It could be based on what sites you've visited. It could be based on the fact that you're in a particular country and not in another country. If you turn on a VPN and switch to a different, like Expedia.ca instead of .com, you may get a different price. And that's not just because of the exchange rate. It's because they don't know who you are. So those kinds of things are playing all through not only the travel industry, but every industry. It is dynamic. It's according to your behavior, and it's going to change depending on how many times you look at it. If you look at it 10, maybe they know that the fourth time, on average, somebody looks at a price, it's the time that they're going to most likely purchase. Well, guess what? The first 3 times, it's going to be pretty low. Fourth time, maybe it'll change because you're about ready to buy. Right? So
they might raise it slightly just because they can't raise it too much, because if all of a sudden some people, like, if it just goes up an extra $10, they're like, oh, well, then I'm just not going to go, or I'm going to look at a different destination. So some people are extremely price sensitive.
Yeah, there are. And I'm oversimplifying, right? This is very complex. The data
Yeah.
behind it, most people don't even actually realize how it really works. If you look at it, it's not sometimes, so there's, we're going to get deep into machine learning, the difference between machine learning and AI. So with machine learning, it you can tell it what the objective is and it can do the thing, but it can't tell you why it did the thing.
Right.
With AI, it's the opposite. You can tell it what to do, and it's just going to kind of figure out its own path towards your objective. But you're telling it like how to do it, as opposed to what you're telling it. You're telling it how to get to the objective, as opposed to what the objective is. So one of them they're a bit opposite. And the thing about it is that what we've got today now is things like rule-based programs where we're saying when you do this, and this, then trigger this price, right? So if you've visited 4 competitors' sites, and we have a cookie on you, and we know that, or if you've seen this price 4 times, then uptick the price $10 or 1% or whatever it is, right? That's rule-based. But now we're getting into a place where it's not necessarily rule-based. We don't actually even know what the rules are. All we know is we want this objective to make more money. And what happens is the systems that are behind the scenes are doing their own thing, figuring it out, and not telling anybody, hey, we've noticed that it takes 4 times for this one type of person, and maybe for 5, 10, 15 other variants of that person, it's going to take 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, whatever it is. It's almost like the machine understands enough to push the envelope, but will never actually tell the rules back to the humans.
Yeah, no, I totally
really
get
weird.
That. Yeah, of course it is. It's like
true.
a black box. Mistake fares, which are these ridiculously low fares that accidentally get pushed out there. Will we see an increase of mistake fares or a decrease of mistake fares due to all this AI and machine learning stuff that seems to be pulling the strings?
Over the long term, I suspect we'll see a lot less mistake fares. Over the short term, though, I suspect we'll bifurcate, and we will have a lot of the small players who can't afford that kind of technology will continue to make mistakes. And those that can't afford that technology will not, because that just won't be a thing. The machines will basically learn enough to never see it, or will have enough verification rules in place, one or the other, that will say, hey, are you sure you want to drop this to $150? Because that's about 1,000% less than what you typically run this on. Right. So I suspect it will get better because of profitability. Anything that money drives it all, right? So if you're losing a lot of money with that, the first thing they'll do is put rules in place and validation in place. And the second thing they'll do over time is going to start to look at, like, how do we use machine learning to predict what it should be? And you'll replace the revenue manager with machine learning once you have enough information to be able to do that. So it'll be a lot less.
Nate, you're Mr. Smarty Pants. And you're married, right?
Yes.
And do you have children?
Yes. 3.
3 children. Okay. So perfect example. You've got your family of 5. And you want to go to, I don't know, Hawaii, Paris, or any other destination, or just, I don't know, Kansas City. What do you do to find that best fare? Or do you have a secret back door in your app and you can get some really amazing fares?
I wish. So I've used what I call travel hacking, and I think a lot of other people use a similar term, but the best thing that we can do is find the cheapest way to do those travels. So whether that's through flights or accommodations, those are usually the biggest bang for your buck. And with 3 kids, I don't have a lot of time. So those are the 2 places I spend most of my time.
Besides flight and accommodation, are you talking about as opposed to wasting your time on car rental, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Car rentals, or, looking for different prices on a particular tour or whatever,
okay.
Things like that.
Disneyland fare. Like Disneyland costs cheaper on Tuesday and whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of margin, and this is the thing, is there's a lot of margin. You spend a lot on flights, so that's the first place you're going to try and cut back, and then you spend a lot on accommodations. And I think the other thing for accommodations, and this is why I built what I built, but the other thing that with accommodations is with flights, there's not a ton of margin there. So what you're looking for is somebody to either make that mistake fare, or to adjust your time period. Like, when do you go? You're going to go off season. You're going to go to, someplace that's still nice, but maybe it's on the shoulder and it's not so expensive. Or you find maybe you're cool with like going on Christmas and nobody else wants to go on Christmas. Fine, be flexible, right? So those kinds of things are great. But with hotels, it's about they have the margin on hotels is massive. And so
really?
they have the
Hold on.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa. Really?
Yeah.
Hotel margins are massive and airline fares are not?
Yeah. The margin. I mean, if you think about the fuel cost that it takes to go back and forth, and all the things that have to go into flying a group of people from one place to another, it is an exorbitant expense. And there are really no middlemen either. I mean, the online travel agencies and those kinds of things, they don't exist to make a lot of money off of those. They exist because they're just, you have to travel and they're going to want to know when you're traveling. So if you're going to book a flight, great. But then the question is like, how much can you make everywhere else? So that's their milk at the back of at the back of the store that you have to walk to. And everything else on the aisle is open for making a lot of money on.
Okay. So basically you're suggesting that the reason people can find, let's say, a 10 euro price for a plane ticket from London to Romania or any other of these ridiculous fares that I've all found where it's like, my God, it's like half the price of a bus and it takes, 10% of the time. And like, how is this even possible? And a lot of times we're scratching our heads. So it sounds like you're saying that this is like a lost leader and that they're hoping to get you on upgrades and buy this food and then pay for luggage and maybe upgrade your seat. And that's their hope, because if nobody takes those little upgrades, then they're fucked. I mean, they're basically going to lose money, right? If everybody was a cheapskate like me, they're all going to lose. They're going to go bankrupt, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing. Not everybody is. We all think we are. We're like, oh, I'm going to take that $20 flight to Lisbon. And then they're like, yeah, but do you want water on that flight? And you're like, oh, crap, I didn't bring my water. Like, well, that'll be $10, right? I mean, they're making their money, right? So they understand the human psychology. And I mean, you're talking about discount fares and or discount airlines, and that's fine. And that they make their not a different way. Whereas like, if you do a luxury liner or something like that, they're making it in a different, everything's provided, right? Well, it's because you've already paid for it all. Once you build a hotel, your costs are done. Now you have to recoup those costs and pay off your loans, right? So all of that is relatively fixed. And then you have I'll say it's relatively fixed costs for your staff and your lights and your, all of your overhead, right? So let's just say, like, worst case scenario, you have some mid-tier hotel and it costs your staff to turn over a room, your staff, your overhead, everything. Let's call it $30 a night to turn over a room, right? What you want to do is you want people there for 4 nights, so you don't have to turn over the room as often. And then you want to maximize your revenue. So people, they hire somebody called a revenue manager, and that person's there to try and figure out what the market is doing. Do we have a huge golf tournament in town? Is it great weather? Is there, somebody's doing a discount and flying people in? There's a major event like Comic-Con in San Diego or whatever. Whatever's going on in the marketplace, they look at it and go, high season, great, we're going to max out, we're going to, up the rates. Simple supply and demand, but they have all kinds of things that they're trying to take into account all at the same time. And they have a single person, the big brands have a person who's going, all right, for this hotel, here's what we think we're going to get. And they're trying to maximize it so that they can get the most revenue and try and balance that out with their occupancy. They're never looking for 100% occupancy. If they're at 100%, they've priced it too low. Mm-hmm. So it's a balance between occupancy and revenue. So because of that, if you think about it, the turnover is 30, let's call it $30. If to turn over a room is $30, and let's say for a penthouse suite, I mean, how much more could it be to turn over a penthouse suite, right? It can't be
$60.
60, yeah. I mean, call it 60, 100. Let's call it $100, right? Yeah. Penthouse suites go for what, $3,000 a night sometimes?
Yeah.
I mean, the margin's incredible.
Right.
And to that point, like, so here's the exact situation, talking about a penthouse suite. When I started asking questions about this wholesale inventory that I started finding, I actually found one hotel in Portugal and one hotel in Las Vegas, and they were both $3,000 a night penthouse suites. I can't afford that. But when I looked at the wholesale inventory, I looked at it and I found the exact same dates, exact same hotel, exact same room for $300 a night. They're
Wow.
covering their margin, and they're still making a little extra, right? But they're doing that so that everybody in the middle who might have an opportunity to book that person into that room is going to get a little slice of that pie. Now, here's the kicker: is Expedia was selling that for $3,000 a night. They're taking $2,700 in margin, and they used to only get 10%, 10 to 20%. So now they're switching from the commission model, which is that 10 to 20%, to the wholesale model where they get to keep $2,700. And that's how they're making all of their money from the online travel agency side. And now if you think about like the revenue manager, they're like, well, let's call it $300 because we just, we're already at occupancy, it's fine. Let's give some money out to the so-and-so, whoever, like the travel managers of the world, and let's get them to book somebody to come in, because maybe what they care about is having somebody in the door that's going to go, maybe it's a casino, and they're going to go spend some money at the casino, right? So now, again, back to kind of like the type of business model you have, right? Yeah. For that kind of person, they're okay taking the loss leader kind of position. Whereas if they book it direct, they'll keep that $2,700. The hotel will be happy to book that out to their loyal members, right? So, and what I found is when that happened, I was a bit ticked when I saw it, because I was like, wait a minute. So yes, I do my travel hacking. Yes, I find my things, but I don't have like a backdoor to hotels or anything like that. It's just looking at it in the best way possible and trying to find, can I use points? Can I take out a credit card and churn through that kind of stuff? Can I, find I found home exchange networks that would come up, and there would be new startups, and they would be giving away points, like 2 weeks worth of points, if you just put your home up on it, but you don't actually have to ever rent it out to anybody or switch with anybody. So I would do those kinds of things and collect all these points and then go spend them. Sure. But when it comes to hotels, if you're not doing that, it's really hard to find a deal. And then I saw this and I was like, wait a minute. You're telling me that the OTAs are going to take $2,700, the hotel's going to take $300, and I'm still paying $3,000 for that penthouse suite? This is why I'm not paying $3,000 for a penthouse suite ever. But the thing is that I saw it and I was pissed. I was like, there's no transparency. And why should Expedia get $2,700? I'll, take $300 if that's what you have to do, but you do not need $2,700. So back to the history, the online travel agencies and the hotel world, the hotel brands started competing with each other, and they fought with each other. And at some point, they all figured out this is a dumb idea. And they came together and they said, let's have a rule. We're going to have a rule that if it's public, it has to be the same rate as everybody else. Our whole industry is going to keep it the same. And that's why today, if you go to Expedia or you go to Kayak or you look at anything, you're going to find $20 difference, maybe, right? There are the occasional groups who will come in and will ruin that rule, and they'll get a slap on the wrist, and then they'll be like, we're going to take away all your inventory. But those groups sometimes are so big that they slap them on the wrist and they say, you can't do that. And then a month later, they're back up and running, and they're, hey, we'll play nice. And then pretty soon, every now and then, they drop the price really hard. So it's all games, right? But the general rule is industry, if it's public, it's going to be the same rate everywhere. And here's the key. If you look at Priceline, you know how Priceline, how you can say if it's a $3,000 night hotel, you might say, well, I want to bid on that. I'm going to say $2,500, because then I feel like I'm saving $500, right? And then behind the scenes, they're still taking gobs of money, like $2,200. And they're like, yeah, that's cool. We'll do that. We're not going to tell you which hotel, right? We'll keep that private. So we can sell you that rate off of what the industry says it's supposed to be, because we haven't told you which hotel it is. But if you're willing to spend $2,500, I have a deal for you. That's how that works. Right. So they're doing it. They're all selling the same inventory. They're just doing it a different way. And that's where I came in. And I thought, no, we're all going to the bottom of the barrel here. Let's just go there quicker. So
what does your technology or your plugin allow people to do? You're accessing these wholesale prices, and how are you able to do that, and how does the customer benefit?
Yeah, so we have an aggregator who looks at all kinds of sources of inventory, and then we pick out all of those wholesale prices and we expose those to the end consumer. And so the way we make money then is, we don't make any money on the transaction at all. And this is what's very different from the rest of the industry. We make no money on the transaction. So when somebody books, they're booking at the lowest rate that we can possibly give it. Our aggregator, our vendor, does take a percentage of that. So I will disclaim that. And that's how they make their money, is through transactions. But it is a fixed percentage on top of anything that happens. So for us, we look at it and say, well, how would we make money? Well, number one, we think that this industry, that the industry is great, but the trust factor sucks. So we're gonna change that by saying we're not gonna make any money off commission. We're not gonna make any money off margin. We're just gonna put it out there. If it's good, book it. But the difference is we're gonna switch the model to more of like a Costco subscription model. So our price right now is $59 a year. We're gonna up it to $95 here shortly. But the idea is when you will give you the prices, we'll show them to you. We have to know who you are, so you have to like log in with a social account or have an account with us. Once you have that account, now we know who you are, and you're considered part of the closed user group model, which means it's private. So because it's private pricing, I can now show you what the wholesale rate is. And so with that, I'm going to be able to show you what that rate is. But because our model, we're switching the model as well, and we don't want it to obfuscate, like we don't want it to be weird where we take some percentage anymore. That's what everybody else does. We're talking about transparency and honesty here. So let's just go ahead and show you what the rate is. And what we're going to do is we're going to monetize on the trust factor. So the subscription model is, an annual fee, and then you can book as much as you want, no commission, no margin. And that's it. That's all there is to it. It's extremely simple. We have one price point, and that's all. And not everywhere has a wholesale rate. So that's where you might see like our price might be the same as somebody else's, because there's no wholesale rates in town. But or not for that hotel, maybe because it's a big event or something like that. Maybe the supply and demand says as the hotels in that area, we're not going to have a wholesale rate because everybody, as a revenue manager, we know everybody's coming into town and there's no need to have anything on the wholesale channels. But that's not common. That goes all over the place, and it depends on the days, it depends on the hotels and all those kinds of things. But generally speaking, they play in that wholesale area, and they're willing to give that hotel out for distribution in a different manner, and they're willing to do it at a price that covers their costs, makes them some profit, and increases their occupancy rate. And that's it. So we're looking at it just purely like, hey, we're not going to play these games anymore. Like, let's just go there. Here's what the price is.
Right.
And in fact, right now you have to book with us, but because we don't make any money on it, what we're going to do is we're going to start referring people out to other places. So we're going to say, hey, you know what? If we don't have the best rate, and Booking.com does for some reason, because there's no wholesale rates in town, we'll tell you to go to Booking.com. This is where the best price is.
And then you'll make a little commission off that, I imagine.
Yeah, we probably will. But even if we don't, there's been a couple groups that I've talked to, and they're like, yeah, we have good prices, but we don't have enough margin to give you an affiliate commission. I'm like, fine, I don't care.
Okay.
Give it to me anyway. I'll send them to you. I don't really care, because I'm not making money off of the transaction anyway. I don't need that. What I want is I want the subscriber base. What I want is the people's trust. And I think that's what's lacking right now. So that's where we're headed.
Speaking of trust, there's something that I don't really trust sometimes when I go to, let's say, Booking.com, and they'll see this little pop-up in the corner of the screen that says 3 rooms available left at this price, or only 1 more room available at this price. This episode is sponsored by Rerouted, which is creating a trusted online marketplace to revolutionize the used outdoor gear industry. This allows you to create your own adventure. Buying outdoor gear is super expensive, and Rerouted is allowing you to do it in a sustainable and inexpensive way. For those who are buying gears, it's great because you're doing something that is environmentally responsible. You're recycling, reusing material and gear. You're also able to get it at an affordable price. So that's the win for those who are buyers. What about for the sellers? Well, you can donate to charity, and you can have 50% of the sale price go to your favorite charity. And also, it's a great way just to get rid of stuff that's been accumulating in your closet and not put it into a landfill. It's a great alternative. So how do you get involved? Whether you're a buyer or a seller, you go to rerouted.co. Again, that's rerouted.co. I'd like to take a minute to tell you about another podcast I think you'll enjoy. If I've learned anything about you, it's that you want real talk about the world around you. That's why I think you'll like the podcast Out Travel the System. brought to you by Expedia. It's taking a transparent look at what it's like to travel these days, whether it's through stories from people who have continued cautiously traveling through the pandemic, or by staying tuned to the very latest news from the industry. OutTravel the system is backed by a solid foundation of data from Expedia, which means it can guide listeners through the best ways to maximize their travel budgets. The podcast is providing inspiration by talking to people who have made travel a central part of their lives, from professional travel bloggers to travel journalists and beyond. This season features U.S. destinations like Chicago, Boston, and New York, as well as international locations like Spain and France. The episodes will guide you through when to go, where to stay, what to do, and everything else you need to know. Look for OutTravel the System on your favorite podcast platform and like and subscribe now. No matter when I'm booking, it always seems like there's only one room left at this price, no matter what the hell I'm doing. And I'm kind of skeptical, like, really? Is this accurate? Now I realize that they have an inventory, that they have maybe a certain set inventory of certain prices. So in that sense, it doesn't mean that's the only room left. It just means the only room of that particular configuration with a queen size bed and and there's only one left at that price. So
that
I guess
they have access to.
They have access to. But if you go to a different website, they have a different inventory and not necessarily overlapping with that. So am I reading this correctly?
Yeah, you're right. They have their own inventory as well as they're aggregating from others too. There's the whole underlying market of wholesale hotels are run by companies called bed banks, and that's a piece of the inventory that you're going to see everywhere because they're looking for distribution too. So they're going to sell to Expedia and Booking and like a million mom and pops as well. So you're seeing that inventory plus any inventory that they might have contracted themselves. And that kind of like mixes together. And so when you see the one left, you're not sure if it's like one of the bed banks or it's one of their own contracted inventory, but somehow it's squeezed down into the one, right? So, but it's one of whatever they have access to. It's not one at that hotel, right?
Right.
It's typically.
Right. And the other thing is that I'm wondering, what is your motivation, Nate, and to get into this big headache? Because it really is just one big fucking headache. And I don't know what motivates you to like say, hey, this looks like a great headache. Let me dive headfirst into this thing and really ruin my life. And so what motivated you to get involved in this massive headache? Because it's a really, really complicated and super paradoxical. And sometimes I find myself, and I'm sure everybody who's listening to this finds themselves, sometimes spending, let's say, 3 hours to save themselves $10 on an airfare or a hotel booking. And then after we've gone through that excruciating thing, then they realize, God, I really wasted my time there because I spent 3 hours to save $10. That doesn't make any sense. So, and yet you're not just spending 3 hours, you're spending your whole life. This is your work to find these little marginal things and that kind of stuff. Now, of course, you occasionally hit these home runs. I'm sure that you're like, wow, I found myself a super deal. But what got you into this whole thing to begin with? And where's your passion?
Well, so I'd say those are two different things. I think there was some overlap, though. I would be lying if I didn't say there's money in it, right? I'm doing it as a business. I'm a business guy. Money's good. I'm a business guy. And I've always done technology with the idea that technology applies to business, right? So, and I'll get into the philosophical part of business too, but
hold on, but I mean, there's a lot of ways to make money, and so why this way?
Because, well, one, I like travel. Two, I think that there's massive leverage here. I think there's a huge hole that we need to expose, like this transparency thing. I think with integrity, I almost feel like it's an obligation for me to go, hey, there's this thing out here that everybody has access to. If you would just take a second and look at it, you could have it too. And I'm like, why not give this to the world? Mm-hmm. There's no reason why I should have this information all to myself. So I'm a big proponent of like giving from that perspective. Mm-hmm. The other is and this is kind of more to the mission, but it's also like something that I truly believe, is that I believe that everybody should travel. And those people who I've met in my life that don't travel, and then this is going to sound like a total jackass here, but I feel like they just do not have a perspective on the rest of the world that they could have, that could be to their advantage. They could see things in a different way. They could see things with a bit more empathy. That's probably my biggest point. Is I believe that when I travel, I have changed over time because I've been able to look at things through other people's lenses. And I think it's that empathy that I feel like we've really severely lacked in our culture recently. And I think that's not because of the lack of capability to travel, because we've been traveling more now than we've ever traveled in history. However, we've done it with, lately it's been, oh, look at, I'm traveling, click, perfect life. That's not what it was. That's not, in my opinion, that's not the intention of travel. I mean, it is for some people, but I guess. And see, I even struggle saying this because I think I've traveled enough, and I think I have at least enough of an understanding that everybody's value system is different, that I want people to be exposed to that, to be able to say, I walked in this place and I completely directly oppose their idea, but they're happy, right? They're doing life completely against all things that I would consider right in this world, but they're happy. And this is a bit ironic because the people who aren't traveling are happy too. And so I got to leave that alone. But my belief system is you should travel because then you're going to see a whole lot of things. You're going to see a lot of stuff that gives you a new perspective on life, and you will have more empathy. And I think that will be good not only for you, but good for the world. And so
it reminds me of this guy. His name is Mark, and he's a Peace Corps volunteer. And he was in Benin when I met him, and he also served in Mali. And he met a woman in northern Benin, and she divorced her husband in order to marry a polygamous man. So she was the only wife, and she decided to be a third wife with another man. And he asked her, why did you do that? And she said, because I want to have a big family. I just love to have an extended big family. And to me, that's what brings me joy. And he said something that stuck with me forever. And it kind of alludes to what you were just saying. He said, I don't think it's my right to tell her what happiness is or what she should be to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what you're saying, which is,
right.
These don't match with my values, but who am I to tell her what she needs to do in order to be happy?
Yeah.
And I thought that and he would have never come to that realization had he not gotten off his fucking ass and gone to Mali or to Benin and seen this thing for himself. And so you're right. I think it is a wonderful thing travel is. And here's the other thing is I agree that there's a lot of people who use the Instagram and they travel for that, but and most people will go to the Parises, Londons, and Italys of the world. But I think there's a certain segment of the population who, after they've done that, they decided to take a second or third or fourth look into another travel experience, and each time they crave a little bit more, and they kind of graduate down this path. And so I wouldn't poo-poo, and I'm not saying you are poo-pooing, the people who are going there and just trying to be Insta-famous with their Instagram beautiful shots. It's a good first step, and we should all applaud them for at least getting out of the house and trying to do something. And then from there, ultimately, they might get addicted to travel and take a second step and a third step, and eventually they're going to have that Benin experience like this this guy had in Benin, this Mark.
The alternative for somebody who's running around on social media saying my life is perfect and here's like my amazing trips, the alternative for them is to set the phone down and experience that amazing trip and to get engaged with the culture, right? The alternative for them is, generally speaking, not traveling. That's not usually the alternative for those kind of people. Mm-hmm. And so that's my kind of like dig is I wish it would be more about getting engaged and understanding and being empathetic and not about showing off, because I feel like that's the alternative that they generally speaking will lean towards, is that thing. It's not like they're not going to go travel. They have the funds, they have the means, they have the way of doing it. And now I'll caveat that by, if that's their business and that's their method and their way of traveling, fine, cool, do your thing, right? It's their way of doing it. But my hope is that same person, even though they might take those pictures, and I don't know anything about those people, but because they do that kind of thing, that they actually set it down and enjoy the moment as well. And that's my hope. But I agree with you completely in regards to like, if that's their gateway drug, great, do it. Right? Like whatever it takes, man. Like just get on the plane. So like I'll be happy if anybody just gets on and like goes and sees a different place. And maybe there's going to be a moment where they're going to bite into that buttery croissant and they're going to go, forever and always, I'm going to love Paris. And that means I love travel, whatever the thing is. It might not be only Paris, but maybe that's their gateway drug to, oh, like we could go to Bucharest or something, like whatever, right? Like start pushing the envelope a little bit. It should be interesting. Yeah.
Speaking about interesting, tell us a little about your plugin, that where do you have to go to get it, and how do you steal some rooms?
Yeah. So it's roomsteals.com. That is the main site, and then we have in there a couple of different variations. So you can just log straight in and go start looking to book. And so we have a search engine on there. You can look anywhere. We have 600,000 hotels in the system. That's worldwide.
And you have no intention to like compete with Airbnb and those other types of VRBO and all that stuff. You're going to stick with traditional hotels, correct?
Yeah, we've kind of looked at that. I think the thing is, we don't want to build a service that's going to compete with them. If they open up their APIs and have the ability to aggregate some of that, then we'll be happy to kind of show that off as an alternative. Because I think it's fine. There's no incentive for us to take the transaction. So for us to show VRBOs and Airbnbs and those kinds of things, I think is a good accommodation alternative. And even if we did like home exchanges, those kinds of things, I'd be happy to bring all those, and the independent hotels and the bed and breakfasts. Happy to have all of those because it's open.
Okay,
we don't make the money on the transaction.
So are you saying that the Airbnb doesn't have a API that you can plug into?
They do, but they limit who can have access to it, and it's very, very strict right now. So there's very few I'll say upstream providers, to get technical, mumbo jumbo, but there's only a couple who have access to that API right now, and they've been exploring
like
as to what it looks
search engines,
like.
basically.
Yeah, no meta search engines. There's only like a couple partners that I know of, and they may have more, but there's only a couple partners that I know of that have access, and they'll show them kind of in line and almost in competition with what hotels are out there on maps and like listing services and things like that. But it's all a referral basis, so you don't book the hotel through a third party. You're always linked over to that Airbnb. So that it exists, but they're being careful and slow about how they roll that out. So I'm not sure if they'll open that up to everybody or not. But
excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Nate, it's been a pleasure talking, and I hope everybody goes out to roomsteals.com to get that plugin. And it does not work with the Macintosh, or?
Yeah, it does, as long as you're on the Chrome browser. Yeah,
Okay.
Right now we're looking at putting out new extensions to support other browsers, but right now Chrome is about 65 to 70% of the marketplace.
What about
of
Brave?
users. Yeah, I believe so. I haven't tested this myself, but I believe that Brave will actually be able to be used. I think there's an extension. I know that Opera you can. I think that Brave, what it does is you have to get an extension that says I want to use Chrome extensions, and if you enable that, then you can go get the Chrome extension. I'd have to double check that, but yeah,
Okay.
Opera, that's how it works. Yeah.
All right. Where's your next trip?
Oh man, let's see. Next trip. Well, we're gonna keep it close. We're going to Palm Springs. And I hope my wife does not hear this before I surprise her with it, because that'll be for her 40th birthday. So
Okay, and what kind? And I hope you booked a hotel already through using your app.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Saved about $100 a night on it. So
Well, we won't let you'll tell them that you paid full price, honey.
of course.
She's worth it.
No, she's like, hey, you saved $100 a night. What else are you buying for me? And I'm like, dinner out.
And that concludes this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel, technology, and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we talked about, or if you'd like to comment on the show, or if you'd like to ask me a question, then go to wanderlearn.com and click on this episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember ftapon. That's my first initial and my last name. ftapon is the username I use on all social media. You can also get to my website by going to ftapon.com. And here's one last reason to remember ftapon. If you like what I do and would like to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ftapon. That's where you can pick up some remarkable rewards for as little as $2 a month. And now for 5 quick favors. Number 1, subscribe to the WanderLearn podcast. 2, download it. 3, share it. 4, review it somewhere. And 5, sign up for my newsletter at WanderLearn.com. Our theme music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.